Chapter 5. When our offer was accepted the next day, I suspected that the realtor's story of a previous offer had been a hoax, but I didn't dwell on it. Instead, I thought positively and answered a prayer. When I called Mrs. Johnson to make arrangements about the move, she told me she would like to keep her phone service hooked up until they had settled, and we could use it without charge. The idea sounded fine to me, but when I told Corey, he was perturbed. I'd rather get our own phone, the sooner the better. But honey, it will save us money. He rolled his eyes. You and your little economies. That evening, Mr. Johnson called, saying it would take a while to clean out the things in the outbuildings. I confided to Corey that maybe we should let him leave it there. I was interested in scrounging for antiques. Corey was aghast. There are no antiques there, it's all junk. Can you imagine how many trips it would take me to get it all to the dump? There's only one thing of value, the myrtle wood burls. There were plenty of those. I suggested he could use the burls to make nut bowls with the machinery he had bought from my father. Papa made so many nut bowls that the machinery is practically programmed to make them without any help. I'll make up the balance by selling antiques. He reluctantly consented to their leaving the junk. At the time, I felt smug and looked forward to moving day. November 15th, 1955 turned out to be the earliest and most severe freeze in Oregon's recorded history. We awakened in our great big 8-room furnace-heated house, little aware of the cold outside. One doesn't feel the cold in furnace-heated houses. But when we saw the ground covered with snow and dry flakes falling steadily, we knew we were in for a trial. Corey needed to inspect scaffolds on a building across town, but said he'd be back by 10. Be ready to go, he said. I wasn't ready by 10, but I was by 11. 11 came and went, then 12, 1, 2. By then I was long past worried. On the other hand, I knew Corey, always late. At 3, the phone rang. I've been in a traffic jam. I'm at the garage now having snow tires put on. I'll be home in an hour. Well, hurry, we have a dinner engagement. Dinner engagement? Where? I reminded him of the invitation from Mrs. Miller, who had said, You'll be tired, so stop by for dinner. It won't be much out of your way. Be here at 5. Well, call and tell them we can't make it. I wouldn't dare. I could hear Corey's annoyance as he hung up the phone. I was annoyed too. Stopping by their Happy Valley house wasn't much out of our way, but it meant going up a hill even steeper than Deerdorf Road. I called Anna, hoping to beg off, but she assured me, Don't worry, you'll need to eat somewhere, I'll hold dinner. I felt she considered it a missionary responsibility, and who were we to interfere with someone's missionary responsibility? By 7 that evening we were on the road, Corey leading the way in the truck, and me following in the car. We were loaded with kids, jingle bells, and all the stuff we needed to spend our first night in our new home. Driving was worse than ascending a mountain pass. Abandoned cars littered the road. On the steepest hill, Corey had to hook a tow chain to the car. At about 8, we arrived at the Millers. Dinner tasted wonderful, although Anna kept reminding us, the food isn't good now, it was ready to eat at 5. She had set the children at one end of the table and adults at the other, which is probably why I didn't notice the transgression until I saw Anna's disconcerted expression. I followed her glance to Freya's tired and weary face. There, like the red rose of summer, was lipstick. I felt like we'd picked up a fallen woman on the way. I could imagine Anna's thoughts. I hoped she didn't feel obligated to bring it up at prayer meeting. They might see it as provocation for a Salem witch hunt. Not that lipstick was banned from the Baptist church. In fact, some of the younger, more modern women wore it as a kind of red badge of courage. But after all, Freya was only 13. Lipstick had been discussed at our house, and my protests had evolved from, no, you're too young, to, just a little bit, but don't let your father see it. He'll have a fit. I sat there wishing for a quick farewell. We know you still have a long day ahead, so go on your way, and we'll see you Sunday at church. But it was not to be. Mr. Miller was eager to relate the history of Happy Valley, while Dale and Sally explained the routine at the school. I suffered through it all, trying to keep my eyes on the cherry pie, hoping that anyone would mistake. Well, it doesn't take Einstein to know what I was hoping. Finally, Mr. Miller released us. You're probably frozen up solid over there. You're right in the wind tunnel, you know. The winds come in from the Columbia Gorge. If I'd thought of it, I could have run over and started the fires. But you're an old mountain man, Corey. You know how to handle freezing weather. When we got to the door, everyone stood around for 10 minutes listening to Mr. Miller praise the pastor for his generosity in offering us Brucey, the pastor's dumb collie. and how he would have loved to have him, except they didn't have the room. During this time, I handed Freya a napkin and gave her a pinch. By 10, we were beginning to unload. The house was unbearably cold. Corey turned the heater up to 10, the top of the dial. We put the mattresses down on the front room floor, but Freya protested. Girls are not supposed to sleep in the same room with boys. Where she obtained that information, I'm not sure, but I bet it was from me somewhere along the line. Sig and Eric don't count. They're just your little brothers, I reasoned. Couldn't I sleep in the kitchen? You'll freeze. We all want to sleep as close to the heater as possible. When we agreed she could sleep on one side of the room and the boys on the other, she finally consented. But she had to put up her hair first. She turned toward the bathroom. Sig grumbled, "And wipe off that you-know-what." Eric added, "Lick stick." In no time, Freya was back. "Hey, Daddy, the water won't run." "Uff da," Corey exclaimed. This meant that at midnight, Corey was under the house trying to thaw out the pipes. When the kids finally quieted down, I stood shaking by the heater in my Hudson seal coat that I had bought in Alaska. I would have liked to go to bed, but it didn't seem fair. Finally, Corey came in, stiff with cold. His old ski cap had cobwebs hanging from the tassel, and he was covered in dirt. But he was in a better mood than I had any right to expect. What he should have done, right then, was pick up a frozen pipe and hit me over the head. I was to blame for all this trouble, but there was no use letting him know that. "Well, now I hope you've learned your lesson," he said. Corey came over to the heater, pulled off his mitts, and rubbed his hands together. "Yeah, how's that?" "You insisted on having indoor plumbing," I replied. "I also insisted on a third bedroom." "Darling, someone is going to get the idea that I forced you into this move. It's okay if you joke like that to me, but don't spread it around. They'll think I'm not the submissive wife." Submissive was a word Mrs. Miller used a lot. Well, I would be, except that you're not the big bossy type of husband you're supposed to be. As soon as we hit the bed, Corey began to snore,